The scream echoed down the hallway and nailed me to the cold tiles, as if I were a criminal caught in the act, with my heart galloping in my old chest. I'm Frances, I'm 68 years old, and I've fed half the neighbourhood with my own hands. But here I seem to be in the way. My son-in-law thinks I'm a stinking burden, but he forgot to read the name on the deed to this house. I've always been a light sleeper, the kind who wakes up when the wind shifts or a cat meows 3 streets over. Hazards of the trade, I guess. I spent 40 years running the kitchen at the Copper Pot, my little diner downtown. There, if you fell asleep, the rice burned or the vendors robbed you blind. I learned to stay sharp, to be efficient, to never let a single thing slide. But old age is a traitor. It strips the confidence from your own body, bit by bit, like the ocean eating away at the sand, and you don't notice it until there's nowhere left to put your towel. That night, my stomach played a nasty trick on me. Maybe it was the chili from dinner, or maybe my guts just don't have the patience they used to. I got up with that dull, urgent ache us old folks know too well, dragging my slippers down the hall so I wouldn't make a sound. I tried to be as stealthy as a ghost in my own house. And I say my own house with full intention, even though sometimes, by the way they look at me, you'd think I was an unwanted guest who overstayed her welcome. The acoustics in this apartment's bathroom are terrible, and the old pipes groan. I did what I had to do, wrestling with the shame of a body that no longer ticks like a Swiss watch. I flushed the toilet, or at least I tried to. The handle was loose. A fix Robert, my son-in-law, had promised to take care of 3 weeks ago, and of course hadn't touched. The water trickled down timidly, without any force, leaving the evidence of my midnight emergency behind. That was when the hallway light flicked on, blinding me completely. Robert stood there in his doorframe, eyes swollen with sleep, wearing a sneer of disgust that broke my soul worse than any physical blow. He didn't have a shirt on, and his crossed arms formed an unbreakable wall between his arrogant youth and my vulnerable old age. "For God's sake, Frances," he roared, not caring that it was 3 a.m. "You useless old woman. You can't even use the damn toilet. You're stinking up the whole house." His words weren't just sound. They were lashes from a whip. I stood paralysed, my hand still resting on the defective handle, trembling not from the cold, but from a hot humiliation crawling up my neck. The smell, sure it wasn't roses, but it was the smell of humanity, of sickness, of getting old. Robert, the handle. I tried to explain, my voice cracking, feeling tiny, microscopic, like a little girl getting scolded. "Excuses," he cut me off, pinching his nose with a theatricality that hurt more than the insult itself. "You always have an excuse. You smell like death. Frances, just pure rot. Shut that door and spray some air freshener. I have to work tomorrow and you're keeping everyone awake with your garbage." He slammed his door so hard the picture frames rattled on the walls. Those pictures I bought, on the walls I painted. I was left alone in the harsh bathroom light, staring at myself in the mirror stained with toothpaste they never bother to wipe away. The woman staring back at me had wild grey hair and watery eyes, but beneath that layer of sorrow, I saw something else. I saw the Frances who built a business from the ground up when her husband died. I saw the woman who paid for her daughter Lucy's college tuition by selling thousands of meatloaves and pot roasts. "Useless old woman," he had said. "Stinks." I cleaned the bathroom. I cleaned it with a quiet, simmering fury. At 3:30 a.m, I poured bleach. I scrubbed the porcelain until my knuckles turned stark white. I sprayed that chemical lavender air freshener until the air was thick and unbreathable. I didn't do it for him. I did it because I am not a filthy woman. I am a decent woman. I went back to my room, but sleep had already slipped out the window. I sat on the edge of my bed, running my hands over the cotton sheets I brought from my old house. My room is small, the smallest in the apartment, because when I moved in 2 years ago, I insisted they take the master suite. So you have your space, I told them. What a fool I was. Lucy, my daughter, didn't come out of her room during the screaming. I know she heard it. She's a light sleeper, just like me. Her silence was worse than Robert's yelling. Her silence was the confirmation that she, too, in some dark corner of her mind, thought the exact same thing, that I was a burden, that I smelled bad, that I was in the way. I waited for the sun to come up. I listened to the sounds of the city waking up, the garbage truck, the early buses, the distant whistle of the factories. Every sound was a reminder that the world kept spinning, completely indifferent to my pain. But I'm not the type to sit around licking my wounds. My father always said, if you fall down, you get up and check what you've got in your pockets. At 7 a.m, I walked into the kitchen. I made coffee, just like I do every single day. The aroma of the fresh brew, dark and strong, started fighting back against that chemical lavender smell from the bathroom. I set the table. Robert came out first, dressed in his cheap suit and a tie he never quite knows how to match. He walked right past me without a glance, went straight to the coffee maker, poured a mug and drank it standing up, staring at his phone. Not a good morning, not an apology, nothing. To him, I was just another piece of furniture, one that occasionally smelled bad and had to be tolerated. Then Lucy came out. She did look at me, but it was a fleeting, guilty glance. Mum, she started, her voice soft. Sit down and eat your breakfast, honey, I told her. My tone so incredibly flat that it even surprised me. There was no warmth in it, only habit. Robert was just really tired last night, she whispered, nervously spreading butter on a piece of toast. You know how he gets when he's woken up. Don't pay him any mind. I don't, I replied, turning my back to her to wash a spoon that wasn't even dirty. Eat up, you're going to be late. Robert scoffed from the living room, digging around for his keys. Tell her to seal the doors shut next time. Seriously, Lucy, it's unbearable. It's like we're living in a nursing home. Lucy didn't defend him. But she didn't defend me either. She just lowered her head and took a bite of her toast. In that exact moment, something snapped inside me. It wasn't a bone or an artery. It was the very last thread of hope I had that this was a family. I looked around the apartment. The solid oak table they were eating on was mine, inherited from my grandmother. The Italian leather sofa where Robert rested his dirty feet was mine, bought with the profits from my best year at the diner. The double-door refrigerator, the microwave, the washer, the 60-inch flat-screen TV, all of it was mine. When I sold my big house and the restaurant to finally rest, I used that money to buy this apartment. I put it in my name, thank God, mostly because of my notary, an old friend who didn't trust modern sons-in-law. But I let them believe they were doing me a favour by taking care of me. I let them live here rent-free, only splitting the utility bills so they could save up and buy their own place someday. But in 2 years, they haven't saved a single dime. They've travelled, they've eaten out, they've bought designer clothes, and I'm the useless old woman. We're leaving, Robert said from the door, not even bothering to look my way. Lucy, hurry up. Bye, Mom. See you tonight, my daughter said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek, a dry, obligatory kiss. Have a good day, I said, and I meant it. I wanted them to have a great day as far away from me as possible. The door shut with a metallic click of the deadbolt. Silence flooded the apartment once again, but this time it didn't feel lonely. It felt charged with possibility. I walked over to the window and watched them walk out of the building. Robert was walking fast, glued to his phone, and Lucy was jogging behind him, trying to keep up. They got into their car. A late model they bought 3 months ago because the old one didn't have any style. I sighed and turned around. I walked to the centre of the living room and stood there, feeling the space. "Useless old woman," I repeated softly, testing the flavour of the words. They tasted like ash, but they also tasted like gasoline. I went to my room and opened the drawer of my nightstand. There, underneath my rosaries and my blood pressure medication, was my old contact book, the book from the copper pot. I flipped through the yellowed pages with wrinkled but steady fingers. I went to the letter M, Mario's Market, mechanic, movers, Taurus moving, Mr. Anselmo, the owner, had been a regular of mine for 20 years. A man of his word, the kind they just don't make anymore. He used to say my beef stews gave his boys the strength to carry pianos. I dialed the number on my cell phone. My hand wasn't shaking. In fact, I felt calmer than I had in years. "Hello," a gruff voice answered on the third ring. "Anselmo, it's Francis, from the copper pot." There was a pause, followed by a warm, booming laugh on the other end of the line. "Miss Francis, it's a miracle. How is the best cook in the city doing? We haven't heard from you in ages." "I'm doing well, Anselmo. Or rather, I'm going to be doing well. I'd need a service." "Whatever you need, ma'am. What are we moving?" I looked around. I looked at the leather sofa. I looked at the oak table. I looked at the silk curtains. I looked toward the kitchen where my appliances gleamed. "Everything, Anselmo," I said, my voice like steel. "I need the biggest truck you have, and I need it right now. I'm emptying the apartment." "Right now?" he asked, surprised. "Is it an emergency? Let's call it that." "A sanitary emergency," I replied, a dark, ironic smile pulling at my lips. "Apparently, there's a bad smell in the house, and I need to clear everything out so it can air out." "Understood. We'll be there in 40 minutes with the full crew." "Where are we taking the stuff?" "To your storage unit down south. For now, I want it all locked up there. I'll be staying at a hotel for a few days." "Done. 40 minutes. Start packing the fragile stuff." I hung up the phone and felt a rush of adrenaline. It wasn't fear. It was pure power. I marched into the kitchen and grabbed a roll of heavy-duty black trash bags. I went to the bathroom, the very stage of my humiliation just hours prior. I opened Robert's cabinet. I grabbed his expensive cologne, his lotions, his electric razor. It all went into a bag. I went to Lucy's room, her makeup, her cheap jewellery she left scattered everywhere, into the bag. No, wait, I stopped myself. That would be sinking to his level. That would be vandalism. That's not who I am. I took their things out of the bags and arranged them carefully on their bed. I wasn't going to touch their personal belongings. I was going to take my things. And the real problem for them was that in this house, it seemed like I had even bought the air they breathed. I moved with an energy I thought I had lost forever. I started taking down the paintings. I wrapped the porcelain figures in newspaper. I unplugged the giant television. I emptied the refrigerator of all my food, leaving only their diet yogurts and their cheap beers sitting on the kitchen floor, because the refrigerator was coming with me too. While I worked, I remembered every single sacrifice. I remembered the grease burns on my arms from the deep fryer to pay for Lucy's university. I remembered the sleepless nights, crunching numbers so they wouldn't go without. I remembered when Robert lost his first job and I stocked their pantry for 6 straight months without asking for a single dime. Useless old woman. I looked down at my hands, a worker's hands. Hands that had kneaded, scrubbed, carried and cared. These hands are not useless. These hands built this domestic empire. And these exact same hands were going to tear it down to the studs. The doorbell rang exactly 40 minutes later. Anselmo stood there with 3 young, broad-shouldered guys. "Miss Francis." He greeted me with a bear hug that smelled of tobacco and honest sweat. "You look exactly the same. Thank you, Anselmo. Come in, come in. We don't have much time. I want you to take everything that has a green sticker on it. I had spent the last 20 minutes sticking little squares of green painter's tape on. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every lamp. Basically, the entire apartment was covered in green dots. And the stuff without a sticker? One of the kids asked, looking around. He was pointing at a pair of cheap plastic patio chairs they had bought for the balcony and an old, stained mattress they kept in the guest room. That stays, I said, just so they can't say I left them with nothing. They got to work. Watching them dismantle the living room was strangely satisfying. It was like watching a necessary surgery to extract a tumour. The sofa went out the door. The dining table followed. The rugs were rolled up. The neighbours peeked out. Mrs. Gertrude from 402, a professional gossip, stepped into the hall with rollers in her hair. Moving out, neighbour? She asked, her eyes wide as saucers. Not exactly. Gertrude, I answered calmly, holding the door open so the boys could manoeuvre the refrigerator. I'm just doing a deep clean. You know how garbage accumulates sometimes, and you just have to sanitize the environment. By 11 in the morning, the apartment was an echo chamber, a hollow shell with indentations on the carpet where life used to be. In the kitchen, only the sink remained because it was bolted to the wall, and the stove, which unfortunately belonged to the building. In the living room, nothing. In my room, nothing. In their room, just their mattress on the floor and piles of their clothes that I had to take out of the cedar wardrobe, which, of course, was also mine. I stood in the middle of the empty living room. The sunlight poured in unobstructed through the curtainless windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It looked bigger, brighter, and for the first time in 2 years, it smelled clean, truly clean. I pulled out my keychain. I rubbed my thumb over the heavy brass keys that opened the front door and the security gate. There was still one final touch missing. It wasn't enough to just leave. I had to make sure the message was received loud and clear, with zero room for misinterpretation. I walked into the bathroom. The toilet sat there, white and lonely. I pulled a thick black permanent marker from my purse. I crouched down in front of the toilet lid. My hand was perfectly steady. I wrote across the white porcelain lid in large, clear block letters, "Here is the only throne you deserve. Use it in good health." I stepped out into the hallway. Anselmo was waiting for me downstairs in the cab of the truck. I pulled the apartment door shut. I turned the deadbolt twice, but I didn't leave just yet. I pulled out my phone one more time. I had one more call to make before I climbed into that truck and started my new life. A call that would permanently change the rules of the game, because taking the furniture was only the opening move. I dialed the number for the building's property management company. "Mr. Davis, it's Francis." "Yes, the owner of 5B. I have some new instructions regarding the lease agreement that technically we never signed with the current occupants." "Yes. Listen closely, because you're going to want to hear this." As I spoke, I heard the elevator ding. My heart skipped a beat, thinking they'd come home early, but it was just the water delivery guy. I smiled at him. Today was a great day. Today, the useless old woman was going to prove that she still knew how to cook a dish best served ice cold. I walked down the stairs, my legs feeling lighter than they had in years, ready to watch the world burn from the front row. The silence in room 405 at the Plaza Royal Hotel was so profound that at first my ears rang. There were no slamming doors, no exasperated sighs, no giant television blasting reality shows with people screaming at each other. I sat on the edge of the bed, a massive bed with crisp, starched white sheets that smelled like bleach and fresh laundry. Not like that cheap lavender spray I tried to cover my shame with hours ago. I placed my purse on the duvet. My hands, which had trembled with humiliation in front of a broken toilet that morning, now moved with surgical precision. I pulled out a worn leather folder, the one Robert always looked at with disdain, because he said it smelled like an antique shop. What my son-in-law never bothered to learn was that inside that old leather was the entire history of my life. And more importantly, the title deed to the golden cage where he slept. I opened the folder and spread the documents across the bed. It was all there. The apartment deed, registered solely under the name Frances Helen Morales. My investment statements, the payout from selling the copper pot, and the utility bills. For 2 whole years, I had made myself small. I had shrunk myself to fit into the little hollow they left for me, apologising for existing, for taking up space, for having basic human bodily functions. Useless old woman, he had called me. I stared at the numbers on the papers. My eyes traced the figures of my life savings, the harvest of 40 years of waking up at 4 a.m. to pick the best tomatoes at the wholesale market. Useless, I whispered, and the words sounded utterly ridiculous in the hum of the hotel's air conditioning. Useless. I was the woman who went toe-to-toe with vendors who circled like sharks when I was widowed at 40. I was the one who learned to hotwire a commercial deep fryer with a butter knife because the repairman didn't show up and the lunch rush was starting. I was the one who turned a rundown dive into the most respected diner in the downtown district. And yet, I had allowed a man who didn't even know how to change a light bulb make me feel like a piece of trash. I got up and walked over to the minibar. I pulled out a bottle of sparkling water, crisp and cold. As I drank, I felt the thick fog of sorrow evaporate, making way for a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was as if I had been in a coma, induced by maternal love and guilt. And Robert's screaming had been the defibrillator that shocked me back to life. I walked over to the hotel's full-length mirror. I no longer saw the dishevelled old woman from the early hours of the morning. I saw Mrs. Francis. I saw the wrinkles, sure, but now they looked like maps of battles I had won. I saw my wide hips, the ones that bothered Lucy so much, because she said they took up too much room in the hallway, and I remembered that those hips had carried babies, heavy boxes of inventory, and the entire crushing weight of a family. I pulled out my old calculator, that heavy grey Casio that has been with me since 1998. The numbers on the keys were rubbed off from use, but my fingers knew the map by heart. I started adding. I added the HOA fees for the building that I paid. I added the electricity, the water, the gas that I paid. I added the high-speed fibre optic internet that Robert demanded for his online video games and streaming movies that I paid. I added the subscription for the maid service that came twice a week, even though they claimed I sat around doing nothing, that I paid. The final number blinking on the LCD screen looked like a criminal indictment. It was a fortune. A small fortune I was giving away every single month in exchange for insults and contempt. I sat back down with the calculator in one hand and Robert's bank statement in the other. Yes, I had access to his accounts. A year ago, when they fell behind on their credit card, Robert had come to me practically in tears, begging for a loan to cover the minimum payment. In his panic, he gave me his passwords so I could make the transfer. He never changed them. His arrogance made him believe I was too stupid to remember a password or figure out how to navigate online banking. I logged into the app on my phone. What I saw made me let out a dry, humourless bark of a laugh. The highly successful Robert, the man who looked down his nose at me in his polyester suits, was deep in the red. They were living paycheck to paycheck. No, worse than that. They owed money on the very shirts on their backs. Their savings were practically zero. They blew everything on keeping up appearances, on overpriced dinners just to post pictures online, on that brand new car they could barely afford. "So useless, old woman, huh?" I muttered, swiping my finger across the screen. "Well, this useless old woman is the only thing standing between you and absolute destitution, little boy." Reality hit me like a freight train. I wasn't the burden. I was the load-bearing pillar. I was the foundation, the walls and the roof. They were just the cheap wallpaper rotting away from the damp. I thought about the times Lucy used to tell me, "Oh, Mum, you just don't understand how the modern world works." She was right. I don't understand a world where you spend money you don't have to impress, people who don't even like you. But I do understand power. Power isn't screaming at 3 a.m. because something smells bad. Power is holding the keys to the reservoir that keeps everyone else alive. And my hand was resting right on the main shut-off valve. I leaned back against the pillows, lacing my fingers behind my head. I thought about them. By now, they were probably on their way home from work. I pictured the scene. Robert trying to unlock the door, walking into the apartment expecting dinner on the table, or at least his usual punching bag to take his daily frustrations out on. Instead, they would find a void, an echo. But the empty apartment was just step one. Taking the furniture was an emotional reaction, an instinct to protect what was mine. Now, it was time for strategy. Now, it was time to show them that this old woman didn't just know how to scrub toilets. She knew how to run a business. And this family, unfortunately, had turned into a toxic asset that required immediate restructuring. I grabbed a sheet of hotel stationery and uncapped my fountain pen, the one my husband gave me before he passed. I started drafting the blueprint. I wasn't going to launch a frontal assault. I wasn't going to go over there and yell. That's vulgar. That's what Robert does. I was going to operate from the shadows, with the silent, lethal efficiency of someone who has run a commercial kitchen for decades. First, utilities. Second, access. Third, legal. I checked my watch. It was 5 p.m. The power company and the internet provider closed their offices at 6. I had time. I dialed the first number. My cable and internet provider. "Good afternoon," I said in my sweetest voice, the one I reserved for calming down angry customers. "This is the account holder for 8940B. "Yes, Francis Morales. "Look, sweetheart, I'm going to be travelling for quite a while, and I need to suspend my service temporarily." "Oh, really? You can do it immediately?" "Wonderful. Yes, cut it all off starting today. No, don't even leave the basic cable. It'll be good to rest the eyes from all those screens." I hung up. A warm, glowing satisfaction settled in my chest. I pictured Robert walking in, loosening his tie, throwing himself on the floor because there was no sofa, and trying to turn on the TV, which wasn't there, or trying to connect his phone to the Wi-Fi so he could complain on Facebook with no connection. Those 2 words were going to sting worse than a slap to the face. Next, I called the power company. "Emergencies?" "No, it's not an emergency, young man. It's a disconnection request due to major renovations. Yes, the apartment is empty. Yes, I'm the owner. I want the power cut first thing tomorrow morning." "Why?" "Well, let's just say there's an issue with the wiring. Some parasites got into the system and they're draining way too much power. It's better to nip it in the bud before it starts a fire. You know what I mean?" The kid on the phone didn't catch the metaphor, but he processed the work order. Tomorrow, when Robert's alarm went off, assuming his phone even had battery left, there would be no power for the coffee maker, no hot water for a shower, nothing. I stood up and walked over to the window. From the fourth floor of the hotel, I watched the city pulse below, people rushing by on the sidewalks, cars honking in the gridlock. I felt like I was part of the world again. I was no longer the inmate in the maids' quarters. My phone buzzed. It was Lucy. I let it ring 1, 2, 3 times. It buzzed again. Robert, I let it ring. I wasn't ready to talk to them, not yet. First, they needed to learn the language of absolute scarcity. They needed to feel on their own skin what it's like to come home and have the house reject you. They needed to smell their own misery without having anyone else to blame for it. I pulled a smaller envelope out of my folder. Inside was a business card the property manager's lawyer had given me that morning when I called him, right before I climbed into the moving truck. Attorney Garrido, specialist in evictions and family disputes, a serious man. The kind who doesn't laugh at jokes but bites down like a pit bull the second you give the command. I had an appointment to see him tomorrow at 10, but my mind, sharp as a chef's knife, was already drafting exactly what I was going to say. I didn't just want to kick them out. That would be too easy. They have squatters' rights, some would say. Their family, others would argue. But in my world, in Francis's world, respect is the only currency that matters, and their accounts were massively overdrawn. I remembered the night before again. The smell, my burning shame, the look of utter disgust on Robert's face. "You're stinking up the whole house," I smiled. A smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "You're right, Robert," I said to the empty room. It did stink. It stank of pure ingratitude. But don't worry, I'm airing it out now. I sat back on the bed and turned on the hotel TV. I flipped to a cooking channel. They were making a lamb stew. I analysed the chef's technique. He was short on rosemary and he was sweating the onions way too fast. Amateur, I critiqued out loud. I felt a ravenous hunger. I hadn't eaten a single thing since that tense breakfast with them. I ordered room service, French onion soup, a pepper steak, and a glass of red wine. Yes, wine. Tonight I was toasting alone. While I waited for the food, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message from Robert. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. "Francis, what did you do? Where is my stuff? Where is the TV? Answer me or I'm calling the cops." I laughed. A deep, loud, club liberating laugh that started in my belly and echoed off the walls. Calling the cops to tell them what? That his mother-in-law took her own furniture out of her own apartment? I typed out a reply. But I didn't hit send. I deleted it. Silence is a far more effective torture for people who are used to being the centre of the universe. The food arrived. The rich aroma of the steak filled the room, heavy, savoury, elegant, nothing at all like the smell of bleach and cheap lavender. I cut a piece of meat, savoured it, and closed my eyes. I was alone, yes, but for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel lonely. I had myself. I had Frances the businesswoman. I had Frances the mother, even if my daughter had failed me. I had Frances the woman. Tomorrow would be the day for legal action. Tomorrow I'd see the lawyer. But tonight was for enjoying the show from a distance. Because I knew that in that dark, empty apartment, the real bad smell was just starting to seep out of the walls. And this time, there wouldn't be anyone around to clean it up for them. I raised my wine glass to the mirror. "Cheers, you useless old woman." I toasted myself. Let's see how they survive when the garbage stops paying the bills. I took a long sip. The wine was perfect, and the night was just beginning. Attorney Garrido's office smelled like antique wood and furniture wax, a serious aroma that commanded respect. A far cry from the smell of dampness and cheap air freshener I had left behind in my own apartment. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my back ramrod straight, my hands folded neatly over my purse. I wasn't there to ask for favours. I was there to give orders. "So, Mrs. Francis," Garrido said, adjusting his glasses and reviewing the stack of papers I had handed him. You want to initiate a squatter eviction process, essentially because there is no formal lease and they don't pay rent. Exactly, counsellor. They've lived there by my grace and my infinite patience. But both of those ran out last night at 3 a.m. Garrido nodded, taking notes with a fountain pen that scratched against the paper with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound. I liked that sound. It was the sound of things being done correctly, without screaming or theatrics. The apartment is in your name, the utilities are in your name, and there isn't a single document giving them the legal right to remain on the premises if you revoke your consent, he continued, looking up. Legally, it's a slam dunk. Emotionally, well, that's usually the hard part. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed with the full weight of the law against your own daughter? I looked him dead in the eye. Garrido was a man in his 50s who looked like he had seen 1,000 messy family feuds. He was probably waiting for me to hesitate, to pull out a tissue and start crying over my poor little Lucy. Counsellor, for 40 years I ran a commercial kitchen. If an ingredient was rotten, it went straight into the trash so it wouldn't ruin the whole stew, I answered, my voice steady, not a single eyelash fluttering. My son-in-law called me a useless, stinking old woman. My daughter kept her mouth shut, effectively agreeing with him. I am not here for revenge. I am here for sanitation. Proceed. Understood. I will draft the notarized letter today. They have a legal grace period to vacate voluntarily. If they don't, we file the lawsuit. I want them served today, I insisted, at their workplaces, if possible. I want them to feel that public humiliation, the exact same humiliation I felt in my own home. I walked out of the office with a feeling of absolute weightlessness in my chest. The midday sun beat down on the pavement, lighting up the concrete city. I felt like a 5-star general who had just ordered the troops to advance. My phone, which I had kept on silent during the meeting, buzzed in my hand like a trapped insect. I looked at the screen. 37 missed calls, 20 from Robert, 15 from Lucy, and 2 from an unknown number that was probably one of their office landlines. There was also a massive wall of text messages and voicemails. I sat down on a park bench under the shade of a large oak tree and decided it was finally time to listen to the symphony I had composed. I put on my reading glasses and opened Robert's chat. Francis, what is wrong with you? Come back right now and bring the stuff. The power is out. Did you pay the bill? You are so useless. You probably forgot. Francis, I got home and there's nothing here. You stole my furniture. I'm calling the police. You're crazy, you senile old bat. I played an audio message. His voice was distorted with pure rage, screaming into the microphone, and in the background I could hear Lucy crying softly. Mum took the curtains. Robert, I don't even have anywhere to sit, she whimpered in the background. Shut up, Lucy. Your mother lost her damn mind. This is grand theft. Francis, answer the damn phone. I smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was a cold, sharp grimace of pure satisfaction. Robert, the man who thought he was the king of the castle, was rapidly discovering that his throne was a rental, and his crown was made of cardboard. What he called theft was simply me repossessing my own assets. I got up and walked toward the bank. It was time for phase 2 of the operation, the financial strike. I walked into the local branch where I've kept my accounts since I was selling Tamazols out of a basket on the corner. The branch manager, Mr. Mendez, waved at me from his glass cubicle. Mrs. Francis, so good to see you. Here to make your usual deposits? Not today, Mr. Mendez. Today I'm making some corporate cutbacks, so to speak. I sat down across from him and pulled out my debit cards. I want to cancel all the authorised user cards under the names Robert Gomez and Lucy Morales. and I want an immediate stop payment on any automatic transfers going from my accounts to theirs. Mendez raised an eyebrow in surprise. He knew I sent them a monthly allowance to help out. Everything, Mrs. Francis, even the auto insurance for Mr. Roberts' car. Especially the auto insurance, I said, drumming my fingers on the desk, and their cell phone bills, and that fancy gym membership they never use. Shut the valve, Mr. Mendez. Not one single drop gets through. They'll be completely exposed, ma'am. If they have automatic drafts pending, they'll bounce and they'll get hit with overdraft fees. That is exactly the point, I replied, staring right through him. I want them to learn that money doesn't grow on trees, and it certainly doesn't magically appear out of the purse of this useless old woman. I walked out of the bank feeling 5 years younger. I was starving. I went to a little diner I knew that served a decent chili, even if it lacked a bit of kick for my taste. I asked for a table for one and turned off my phone. I didn't want their screaming ruining my digestion. While I ate, I thought about them. By now, Robert must have realised it wasn't just a blown fuse. They must have noticed the Wi-Fi router was dead. I pictured the empty, silent apartment slowly turning into an oven because the air conditioning was dead. The refrigerator. I dropped my fork. The refrigerator was packed with the groceries I bought on Sunday. Meat, dairy, fresh vegetables. Without electricity, all of that was going to start rotting in a matter of hours in this heat. "You're stinking up the whole house," he had screamed at me. The irony was so rich it was almost sickeningly sweet. Oh, it was going to stink now, all right. But this time, it would be the stench of his own sheer incompetence. I finished my meal and turned the phone back on. A call came through immediately. It was Lucy. I decided they had suffered enough silence. It was time to push the first domino over right in front of their eyes. I swiped to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice smooth and relaxed, as if I had just woken up from a lovely nap. "Mom!" Lucy's shriek forced me to pull the phone away from my ear. "Mom? Oh my God, where are you? We are freaking out. Robert is furious." "Hi, sweetheart. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for asking." "Great? Mom? You took everything. The house is empty. We don't have power. We don't have hot water." "Robert says he's going to sue you." "Put him on," I said dryly. There was a brief scuffle on the other end, and then Robert's voice, panting and aggressive, blasted into my ear. "Listen to me, you crazy old bat. You have exactly 1 hour to bring my things back and turn the hour on, or I swear to God I will hunt you down and drag you back here myself. This is abuse. I am a respectable man." "Robert, lower your voice," I told him, using the exact same tone I used to scold meat vendors who tried to pass off chuck as sirloin. "First of all, they are not your things. They are my things. I have the receipts for every chair, every painting, and every fork. Second, it is my house. The deed is in my name. And third, and this is the most important part, you are no longer welcome on my property." "What the hell are you talking about?" "I live here. I have rights." "You had privileges, Robert, not rights. And you lost them last night when you decided my very existence offended your delicate nose. You complained that the house stank because of me. Well, I eliminated the root of the problem. I left. Now, if the house stinks, it's on you." "You can't do this to us," he roared. But I caught the slight tremor in his voice. The panic was starting to bleed through the cracks in his rage. "We don't have the money to go anywhere else right now. At the end of the month, maybe, but not now. That sounds like a you problem. You're young. You're useful, right? Not like me. I'm sure you'll figure something out." "Oh, and Robert? What?" "Check your work email. You too, Lucy. My lawyer just sent you a formal notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises, and I highly suggest you use the daylight to pack your bags, because I don't think the power company is in any rush to reconnect service to an account I just permanently closed. I hung up before he could spit out a reply. I stared at the phone for a few seconds, feeling my heart beat a little faster. Not out of fear, but from the pure adrenaline of finally dropping the dead weight I had been carrying on my back for 2 years. I stood up, paid the bill, and left a generous tip. The waiter smiled at me. "Thank you, ma'am. Have a great afternoon." "I will, son. Trust me, I will." I decided not to go back to the hotel just yet. I wanted to see it. I needed to see it. Not out of morbid curiosity, but to close the circle. I hailed a cab and asked the driver to drop me off at the corner of my street, making sure he didn't stop directly in front of my building. I walked into the coffee shop across the street, a place with massive floor-to-ceiling windows that gave me a perfect view of my building's front entrance. I ordered an iced tea and sat down to watch the show. At 4 p.m, I saw Robert walk out. His dress shirt was unbuttoned, his face flushed and dripping with sweat. He was pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, screaming into his phone, waving his free hand in the air. He looked so small from over here. He looked common, vulgar. Lucy came downstairs a few minutes later. She had traded her heels for flip-flops, and her hair was tied up in a messy, greasy ponytail. She sat down on the front step and buried her face in her hands. It hurt to see her like that. I won't lie. She's my daughter. But sometimes, for a broken bone to set properly, you have to re-break it. She had allowed that man to humiliate me. She had allowed them to turn me into the hired help in my own home. She needed to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet, out from under his shadow, and out from under my skirt. Suddenly, a delivery van pulled up. It was from a local electronics store. The driver got out and talked to Robert. I watched Robert pull out his wallet, fish out a credit card, and swipe it on the portable terminal. The delivery guy shook his head. Robert tried a different card. The guy shook his head again. Robert started screaming at the poor kid, kicking at the air. The delivery guy, a big, burly kid who clearly didn't get paid enough to deal with tantrums, hopped back in his van and drove off, taking whatever portable AC unit or industrial fan Robert had desperately tried to buy on credit. The cards had bounced. Mr. Mendez worked fast. I watched Robert throw his wallet onto the concrete and kick it into the gutter. Lucy didn't even flinch. Right then, my cell phone buzzed. A text from Robert. "Please, Francis, let's talk. Lucy feels sick. It's so hot in here. Don't be cruel. Cruel." The word blinked up at me from the screen. I remembered the night before. I remembered my shaking hand on the toilet handle. I remembered his sneer of disgust. I remembered how I felt. Like garbage, like a burden, like something meant to be thrown away. I typed my response slowly, savouring every keystroke. Cruelty, Robert, is telling the woman who put a roof over your head that she stinks. What you are experiencing right now isn't cruelty, it's reality. And reality costs money. If Lucy feels sick, take her to a hotel. Oh, right, I hope you have cash. I hit send. Through the tinted glass of the coffee shop, I watched Robert read the text on his screen. I watched him freeze, completely petrified. He snapped his head up and looked around, searching frantically. His eyes scanned the street, the neighbouring buildings, the coffee shop. For one split second, our eyes locked across the distance and the polarised glass. He couldn't see me, but I felt it in my bones. He knew I was there. He knew the useless old woman was watching him from a position of absolute power he never even fathomed I possessed. His arms dropped limply to his side sus. There was no more arrogance in his posture, only total defeat and profound confusion. I finished my iced tea. The ice cubes clinked against the empty glass. It was time to go back to the hotel and prepare for the next phase. Because this wasn't going to end with just cutting their power and their cash flow. Tomorrow, I had to face Lucy, and that would be the hardest battle of all. But today I had recovered something far more valuable than my furniture. I had recovered my dignity. I walked out of the coffee shop and headed toward the taxi stand, my head held high, my steps firm, leaving the miserable couple melting on the hot pavement in front of my building. The lesson was just beginning. And I was the one holding the chalkboard, the chalk and the eraser. The night in room 405 at the Plaza Royal was the most peaceful sleep I'd had in years, even though my phone lit up on the night like a frantic firefly. I had silenced the notifications, but the screen flashed every 10 minutes. Texts from Robert, missed calls from Lucy, voicemails from random numbers that were undoubtedly borrowed phones. I didn't answer a single one. I let the silence be my answer. The cold brick wall they kept crashing their heads against. When I woke up, I ordered a full breakfast, huevos rancheros, fresh squeezed orange juice, and a pot of premium drip coffee. As I buttered a warm piece of toast, I pictured their morning. Without curtains, the morning sun would have blasted them in the face by 6, waking them up on a hard floor, with no coffee, no hot shower, and the gag-inducing smell of raw meat spoiling in a dead refrigerator. Poetic justice occasionally smells like sour milk. At 9 sharp, I walked into Attorney Garrido's office. I wore my bed-tailored suit, a navy blue one I used to wear for bank meetings when I was securing the loan for the restaurant. I wore my pearls and styled my hair perfectly. The useless old woman was going to look absolutely flawless. "Good morning, Mrs." Francis, Garrido greeted me, gesturing to a chair. "Your tenants, or rather your squatters, have been blowing up my secretary's phone since 8. They are demanding to speak with you. They claim it's a life or death emergency. To them, losing their luxury is death, counsellor," I replied, casually setting my folding fan on his desk. "Tell them they can come in. I'm ready to receive them." We waited 20 minutes. When the door finally swung open, the sight that stumbled in was downright pathetic. Robert, who always prided himself on looking like a modern executive, was wearing the exact same dress shirt from the day before, wrinkled to hell and stained with yellow sweat rings under the arms. He had deep, dark bags under his eyes, and a day's worth of scruff made him look dirty and unhinged. Lucy trailed behind him, her eyes swollen shut from crying, her greasy hair tied up in a sloppy bun, wearing a dress she had clearly dug out of the dirty laundry hamper because she had no way to iron anything else. The smell they dragged in with them instantly polluted the air-conditioned office. They smelled like stress, like stale sweat and dampness. They smelled like defeat. Robert barged in first, fists clenched, but stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me sitting there, cool, calm, and collected, hands folded neatly in my lap. "You!" he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You are out of your damn mind! Do you have any idea what we went through last night? We slept on the floor! On the floor, Francis! Like dogs! Good morning to you too, Robert," I said softly, flicking my fan open with a sharp snap of my wrist. "Take a seat, assuming you still remember how to act civilized, since you clearly forgot how to treat human beings." "I'm not sitting down," he roared, lunging toward the desk. "I am going to sue you. You stole my peace of mind. You stole my furniture. You blocked my credit cards. That is illegal. I am your son-in-law, damn it." Councillor Garrido cleared his throat. The sound dropped like a heavy stone down a deep well. "Mr. Gomez, I highly suggest you lower your voice. You are in a law firm, and everything you say can and will be used against you in the civil suit that is already in motion. And regarding the credit cards, it is my legal understanding that those accounts are the sole property of Mrs. Frances Morales, and you were simply an authorised user, a privilege that has evidently been permanently revoked." Lucy collapsed into one of the chairs across from me, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mum, please," she wailed, burying her face in her hands. "We have zero money. Robert tried to buy breakfast this morning and the card declined. We don't have gas in the car. We have nowhere to go. Why are you doing this to us? It was just a stupid argument. Robert was just tired." I stared at her, my daughter, the little girl whose hair I used to braid, whose scraped knees I used to bandage. Now, she was a 35-year-old woman crying because Mummy took away her credit card. "It wasn't an argument, Lucy," I corrected her, snapping my fan shut and pointing it at her. "It was a revelation. Robert called me a burden, a useless old woman who stank up the house. And you kept your mouth shut. Your silence signed the eviction notice." Robert slammed his open palm on the desk. "It was the heat of the moment." He made excuses, though his eyes darted around the room looking for an exit. "People say things. But you planned this. You're a calculating witch." "You know what? I don't care. Keep your damn money. We're getting a lawyer and we're fighting for the house. We've lived there for 2 years. We have squatters' rights." I laughed. A short, dry, venomous laugh. "Go right ahead, Robert. Hire a lawyer," I said, pulling the old leather folder from my purse. "But before you do, I think you should see this." I slid the folder across the desk toward him. "What is this?" he asked, eyeing it like it was a live grenade. "Reality, Robert. Open it." He flipped the folder open aggressively. His eyes scanned the top document. It was a printed spreadsheet with rows and rows of numbers. "That is the grand total of what I have spent on the two of you over the last 24 months, I explained, tapping the paper. Fair market rent for that apartment, $2,500 a month. Electricity, water, gas. High-speed fibre optic internet, $400 a month. Your credit card bills that I paid off averaged $1,500 a month. The groceries, the maid service, your car insurance, the loans you never paid back." Robert turned the colour of chalk. He flipped the page. "In total, Robert, you two have burned through almost $150,000 of my life savings in 2 years. 150 grand that I bled for, sweating over a hot stove while you played big-shot corporate executive at an office that pays you peanuts." Lucy looked up, her jaw practically on the floor. "That much, Mom?" she whispered. "Yes, sweetie, that much. And in exchange for that massive investment, what was my return? Getting screamed at 3 a.m. Contempt. You treated me like I was a broken piece of furniture blocking the hallway." Robert threw the folder back onto the desk, desperately trying to scrape together whatever scraps of arrogance he's had left. But he just looked tiny, ridiculous. "Money isn't everything," he yelled, his voice cracking. "We're family. Family is supposed to support each other." "Support is a two-way street, little boy," I fired back, standing up. I felt 10 feet tall looking down at them. "I supported you with my money and my broken back. You supported me with insults. The social contract is void." "We're not leaving," Robert insisted, though he just sounded desperate now. "We'll change the locks. You can't just throw us out on the street." Attorney Garrido intervened again, sliding an official document across the mahogany desk. "Actually, Mr. Gomez, the locks were already changed this morning by a certified locksmith under my direct supervision, while you were en route to this office. Your personal belongings, the clothing and the mattress you left behind, are currently being packed by a moving company and will be deposited in a storage unit paid up for 30 days. Here is the address and the key to the padlock." Robert froze, his mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on a dock. All the blood drained from his face. "What?" he stammered. "You broke into my house?" "It is my house, Robert," I reminded him, "and since I cut the power, the alarm system was dead. Nobody had to break anything." Lucy started sobbing harder. a guttural wail of genuine panic. "Where are we supposed to go?" "Mum?" she cried. "We don't have any money. Robert is 3 months behind on his car payment. If we don't pay, they're going to repossess it." "Then let them take it," I said, cold as ice. "Maybe then you'll learn how to walk. Walking clears the mind, and you're going to need to do a lot of thinking to climb out of the hole you dug yourselves into." I walked over to the office window. Looking out, the massive city seemed totally indifferent to the drama in this room. My heart ached. Of course it did. Watching my daughter fall apart wasn't my idea of a fun Tuesday, but I knew, with the ironclad certainty that only comes with age, that if I handed them $1 single more, I would be condemning them to be useless parasites for the rest of their lives. "Mom." Lucy stood up and reached out to hug me, but I took a sharp step back. "No, Lucy. Do not touch me with those hands that didn't know how to defend me." She stopped, looking as if I had slapped her. "I'm a useless old woman, remember?" I continued, turning to face them one last time. "So useless, I don't even know how to flush a toilet." Well, this useless old woman just showed you that she knows how to use something infinitely more powerful, capital. You mistook my generosity for weakness. You confused kindness with stupidity. Robert ran his hands through his greasy hair, practically pulling it out by the roots. He looked like he was teetering on the edge of a total nervous breakdown. "Francis, please," he begged. And for the first time in 2 years, he said my name without an ounce of sarcasm. "We literally have nowhere to go. My parents live out of state. We don't have friends who can take us in this fast. Just give us a week, 1 week to figure things out. I am begging you." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had screamed "you stink" at me less than 48 hours ago now. He was the one reeking of pure desperation. I reached into my purse and pulled out a plain white envelope. I dropped it on the desk. "There's $200 in there," I said. Robert's eyes lit up with a pathetic glimmer of hope. "That's exactly enough for 2 nights at the Starlight Motel out by the highway. It's not the Plaza Royal, but it has beds and a toilet, and I highly suggest you conserve water, because they charge extra if you take too long in the shower." Robert stared at the envelope like it was a pile of dog crap, but he snatched it up anyway. He took it because he had 0 options left. His pride was worth less than those 2 crisp bills. 2 nights, I repeated. You have 48 hours to find a second job, sell that car you can't afford, or go beg for money from someone who doesn't know you as well as I do. "Mum, you can't just abandon us like this," Lucy whispered. "I already did, sweetie, and trust me, someday you will either thank me for it, or you will hate me until the day you die. But at the very least, you will respect me." I gave Councillor Garrido a nod. He stood up, signalling that the meeting was officially over. "Please vacate the premises," the lawyer ordered. "Mrs. Morales has other business to attend to, and as a reminder, you are legally barred from approaching the building. The security guards have your photographs and strict orders to have you arrested for trespassing if you even step foot in the lobby." Robert shoved the envelope into his pocket. He shot me a look of pure unadulterated hatred mixed with sheer terror and grabbed Lucy by the arm. "Let's go," he muttered through gritted teeth. "Stop begging her." The old bat completely lost her mind. Let her die alone, rotting in her pile of money. "Better to die alone than in bad company," I replied, my voice loud, clear and unwavering. "And don't worry about the money, Robert. I fully intend to blow every last cent on luxury cruises and vintage wine before I drop dead. Wouldn't want you getting your hopes up for an inheritance." They dragged their feet out of the office. The heavy wooden door clicked shut with a soft, definitive thud. Silence returned to the room, but this time it wasn't a heavy silence. It was immaculate. I collapsed back into the leather chair. feeling my legs shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from the massive adrenaline dump. It had been the hardest negotiation of my entire life. Harder than any contract with suppliers or health inspectors. I had just negotiated the freedom of my own flesh and blood. Garrido looked at me with deep respect. "You were incredibly harsh, Mrs. Francis. You have to cut gangrene off clean, counsellor," I said, pulling a lace handkerchief from my purse to dab away a single rogue tear that had managed to escape. If I hesitated for a second, if I gave them a month, in 2 weeks they'd be back on my sofa watching TV while I cooked their dinner. "And what's the plan now?" he asked. I stood up and walked over to the window again. The sun was blinding over the city skyline. Somewhere down there, Robert and Lucy were trying to hail a cab with their $200, facing the real world for the first time in years. I had my empty apartment, my full bank accounts, and a future that, for the first time in decades, belonged exclusively to me. "Now, counsellor," I said, tucking my fan back into my purse, "now I'm going to go buy new furniture that I like, and maybe I'll hire a painter. I always wanted a yellow living room, but Robert thought it was tacky. Well, now, my living room is going to be as yellow as the damn sun. And if they don't like it, they don't have to look at it." I grabbed my bag. I felt the weight of my house keys in my pocket. They were heavy, yes, but it was a comforting weight. The weight of absolute ownership. "Oh, and counsellor," I added before walking out the door, "send me the invoice for your billable hours today. Unlike my son-in-law, I pay my debts in full and in cash." I strolled out of the building, taking my time, letting the warm air hit my face. I didn't feel old, I felt seasoned. And the world, which just 2 days ago felt like a prison cell of ingratitude, now looked like a wide-open menu, just waiting for me to order. The useless old woman had just fired her bosses. And damn, did it feel good to own the company again. It's been 6 months since the moving truck hauled away the remains of my old life. And if I'm being completely honest, I still wake up smiling. My apartment is no longer that dreary cave of neutral tones and pretentious decor that Robert insisted on keeping so it looked like a New York loft. Now, the living room walls radiate a vibrant canary yellow, a colour so bright it forces you to be in a good mood whether you want to or not. And my furniture is heavy, rustic wood, the kind of furniture that hugs you when you sit down, smelling of beeswax and real home. The first week was strange, I won't deny it. The silence which used to crush me like a concrete slab slowly morphed into music. There are no more slamming doors. No more screaming for ironed shirts at 7 in the morning. No more complaints about the smell of my cooking ruining their designer clothes. Now, my house smells exactly how I want it to smell. Fresh rosemary, baked bread, floor wax, and above all, absolute freedom. I woke up early this morning, not from insomnia or a stomach ache, but because I had a lot of work to do. I went into the bathroom, my newly renovated sanctuary. I ripped out that temperamental old toilet that started this whole war, and I had them install a brand new, modern, high-efficiency model. I put out turquoise Egyptian cotton towels and sandalwood candles. Every time I walk in there, I laugh out loud. Useless old woman. I tell the mirror as I wash my face with oatmeal soap. Just look at the palace you built with your uselessness. While I was brewing coffee, a dark roast with cinnamon and brown sugar, exactly how I like it. The way they used to call hillbilly coffee, the doorbell rang. It was Anselmo, my mover. He comes by every Tuesday now, but not to haul furniture. He comes to pick up the orders. "Morning, Miss Francis," he boomed in his gravelly voice. "Smells like heaven in here. My boys are already drooling in the truck. Come on in, Anselmo. The coolers are all packed and ready. Because, you see, a woman who has worked for 40 years doesn't just sit still and twiddle her thumbs. After I kicked out the vampires, which is what I affectionately call my daughter and son-in-law in my head now, I got bored by the second week. So I went back to doing what I do best, cooking, but this time on my own terms. No restaurant, no slave labour hours. I started Francis's Box. Homemade meal preps for corporate offices, but I only make 50 boxes a day, not one more. It's a subscription-only service, and there's a waiting list a mile long. Anselmo loaded up the coolers with today's special, slow-roasted pulled pork with greens and red rice. "Hey, ma'am," he said before leaving, lowering his voice and taking off his baseball cap. "I saw your girl the other day, Lucy. I felt a sharp, sudden prick in my chest, fast and stinging, like grease popping from a frying pan. My hand froze over the kitchen counter." "Oh, really?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "And how did she look?" "Well, she was working over at a shoe store downtown. One of those big corporate chains where they make you wear the ugly polos. She looked dead on her feet, ma'am. Skinny." He hesitated for a second. "But she looked awake. She didn't have that brain-dead look on her face anymore, like she always did when she was trailing behind that husband of hers." I nodded, swallowing down a complex cocktail of pain and fierce pride. "Thanks for telling me, Anselmo. Enjoy the lunch." When he shut the door, I stood staring out the window. I knew Lucy was working. I knew because, even though I cut off the cash, I didn't cut off my ears. The building doorman, the lady at the corner bodega, even Councillor Garrido, they all bring me updates, even when I don't ask for them. Robert and Lucy lasted 2 weeks in that cheap motel. Then they moved into a tiny, roach-infested studio in a rough neighbourhood across town. The bank repossessed the car a month later, and according to the grapevine, their screaming matches could be heard 3 blocks away. Apparently, when poverty walks in through the front door, Robert's love flies right out the window. I decided to go for a walk. I needed fresh air. I put on my new coat, a gorgeous cherry red wool coat I bought, with the money I used to waste paying their internet bill, and headed downstairs. The neighbourhood greets me differently now. I used to be the old lady who lives with her daughter. Now I am Mrs. Francis, the boss. Mrs. Gertrude, the nosy neighbour, stopped me in the lobby. "Francis, you look stunning!" "Hey, I heard your chili last week was award-winning. When are you going to let me try some?" "Whenever you learn to stop sticking your nose in other people's business." "Gertrude," I replied with a wink, and she burst out laughing. I walked down to the farmer's market. I still like picking out my own produce. While I was inspecting some avocados, I heard a familiar voice behind me, a whiny, aggressive voice that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "I'm telling you, it's totally unfair, boss. I have management experience. I was a project coordinator." I turned around slowly, staying hidden behind a pyramid of oranges. It was Robert. He was arguing with the owner of the butcher shop, probably begging for a job or trying to sell him some scam. He looked atrocious. The executive suits were long gone. He was wearing faded, stained jeans and a polo shirt that stretched tight over his growing gut. His hair was long and greasy, but the worst part was his posture. Hunched over, defeated, yet he still had that stupid, arrogant spark in his eyes. The butcher, a massive guy who didn't tolerate nonsense, waved him off with a meat cleaver in his hand. "People come here to work, kid, not to give orders. And you got hands like you ain't never held a broom in your life. Step aside, you're scaring away my paying customers." Robert spun around, red in the face with fury, and he saw me. Our eyes locked through the smell of cilantro and raw beef. I waited for him to scream at me. I waited for him to make a scene, to call me a useless old woman again. But he didn't. He opened his mouth, closed it, and dropped his gaze to the floor. He looked at my brand new leather boots, my red wool coat, my tote bag full of premium groceries. And then he looked at his own filthy, worn-out sneakers. The shame radiating off him was so thick I could practically touch it. He turned on his heel and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, running like a coward from the woman he tried to destroy. I didn't feel an ounce of pity. I felt balance. Sometimes the universe just needs a little shove to put things exactly where they belong. I walked back home with a quiet heart. I made lunch just for myself, a simple, comforting chicken noodle soup. I sat at my oak table, the one I repossessed, which now sported a hand-embroidered tablecloth. When I finished, I noticed an envelope had been slid under my front door. There was no postage stamp. It just said Mom in Lucy's round handwriting. I poured myself a glass of red wine before opening it. My hands weren't shaking. Not anymore. I ripped the envelope open. Inside were 3 crisp $50 bills and a page torn from a spiral notebook. Mom, I know this doesn't even cover a fraction of what we owe you. I know $150 is a joke compared to the $150,000 we blew through, but it's what I had left from my paycheck after paying rent and buying groceries. Robert is gone. Well, actually, I kicked him out 3 days ago. When we lost everything, I realised he wasn't mad about losing you. He was mad about losing your wallet. He screamed at me. He told me I was just as useless as you are. And in that exact moment, Mom, I heard your voice in my head. I heard you say that dignity doesn't have a price tag. I told him to get the hell out. I told him if I was so useless, then he didn't need my retail salary to feed himself. He moved back in with his mother. I stood here. I'm working at the shoe store on 5th. My feet ache like never before. I come home dead to the world, and my hands are getting rough from carrying cardboard boxes all day. But Mom, it's my money. Nobody handed it to me. And for the first time in my entire life, when I buy a loaf of bread, it tastes like absolute heaven because I bought it with my own sweat. I'm not asking you to forgive me yet. I don't deserve it. I was a coward and a terrible daughter. But I promise you, every single month, you are going to get an envelope just like this one, even if it takes me 100 years to pay you back. Thank you for slamming the door in my face. It was the only thing that forced my eyes open. Lucy. I set the letter down on the table. A single tear rolled down my cheek, but it wasn't out of sadness. It was pure relief. It was the tear of a gardener who had to hack off a diseased branch and now finally sees a strong green shoot sprouting from the trunk. Lucy had dumped Robert. That was the real victory, not the money, not the furniture. My daughter had amputated the parasite, all because I taught her, in the cruelest way possible, that a woman never has to carry the dead weight of a man pulling her underwater. I picked up the $150. I could have spent it. I could have donated it. But I decided to do something much better. I walked into my bedroom, opened my wall safe, and slipped the cash into a brand new envelope. On the front, I wrote, "Seed money for Lucy's business." I wasn't going to tell her, not yet. I was going to let her keep working, keep sweating, keep learning the true value of $1. But someday, when she was truly ready, when her hands were as calloused and wise as mine, I would hand every single cent back to her, multiplied, so she could build her own empire. The suns began to set over the city, bathing my yellow living room in deep golden amber. I sat down in my favourite armchair and put my feet up. My phone buzzed. It was a message in the building's group chat. "Mrs. Francis, is it true you're organising the building's Christmas dinner this year? Everyone says if you aren't cooking, they aren't coming." I smiled and typed back, "Of course I am. But none of that dry turkey nonsense. We're doing glazed ham. And everyone brings their own wine. I'm not running a charity." I hit send and locked the screen. I looked around. This was my kingdom. A kingdom built with decades of blood and sweat, defended tooth and nail, and reclaimed with pure, ruthless intelligence. I thought about the word useless. What a strange little word. Useless is the person who can't survive without sucking the blood from someone else's veins. Useless is the person who screams because they have no real arguments. Useless is the person who thinks getting old is a disease instead of a masterclass. I, Frances, at 68 years old, with my varicose veins and my morning backaches, am anything but useless. I am the matriarch who served family by destroying it first. I am the businesswoman who reinvented herself when the whole world wrote her off retirement. I am the woman who learned that self-love smells like bleach, balanced checkbooks, and a fresh pot of coffee. I stood up and walked into the kitchen to prep the dough for tomorrow's meat pies. My hands, wrinkled and dotted with age spots, sank deep into the warm, soft dough. I felt the texture, the life, the sheer power of creating something magnificent out of absolutely nothing. "You're stinking up the whole house," I whispered, remembering that scream in the dark hallway. I took a deep breath. It smelled like vanilla. It smelled like butter. It smelled like absolute triumph. "No, Robert," I said to the empty room as I started kneading with brutal force. "The house doesn't stink. The house finally smells like me." And as the sun finally slipped below the skyline, I let the dough rest, knowing that tomorrow, just like me, it would be ready to feed the world. Because old women like us don't spoil. We cure, we season. And in the end, we are the secret ingredient that makes the whole damn thing worth it. Before we dive into the deep life lessons of this narrative, it is crucial to emphasize that this story was created strictly for educational purposes, serving as a profound mirror for human behavior, family dynamics, and the enduring value of self-worth. When we listen to the journey of Frances, a 68-year-old woman who spent 40 years running a local diner, we face a harsh reality about how society often treats the elderly. Frances found herself reduced to an unwanted burden in the very apartment she purchased with her own life savings, all due to a natural midnight emergency and a faulty toilet handle her son-in-law, Robert, neglected to repair. The cruel insults thrown at her represent a widespread societal flaw, the tendency of the younger generation to mistake the physical vulnerabilities of aging for a total lack of utility and value. Yet the most painful element of this ordeal was the enabling silence of her daughter, Lucy, who chose personal comfort over defending the mother who had sacrificed everything for her future. This silence highlights how easily dependence and entitlement can blind us to the sacrifices of those who built the very foundations we stand upon. TXT+3 Frances's response to this deep humiliation provides an extraordinary blueprint for reclaiming personal power and setting immovable boundaries. Instead of engaging in draining arguments or shouting matches, she chose a path of quiet, deliberate and strategic execution. By reclaiming her own furniture, disconnecting the utilities, and cutting off the financial lifelines funding her ungrateful family's luxurious lifestyle, she forced them to face the true, unsubsidized cost of reality. Robert and Lucy quickly realized that their arrogance was entirely funded by the woman they openly despised. This narrative beautifully demonstrates that true humanistic values do not demand that we tolerate emotional abuse in the name of family. By removing the toxic dynamic from her life, Frances acted out of a profound necessity to protect her peace and teach a vital lesson about accountability. Her tough love ultimately served as a catalyst for genuine transformation, forcing Lucy to leave her toxic marriage take responsibility for her life, and finally discover the dignity of honest labour. In the end, the vibrant new yellow walls of France's home stand as a triumphant symbol of renewal, proving it is never too late to stand tall. Protect your peace and live a life saturated with self-respect. TXT+4. True human dignity is never defined by the number of years we have lived, but by the boundaries we refuse to let others cross. When we look at the elderly in our lives, we must see them not as fading shadows of the past, but as the foundational pillars that made our present comforts possible. Generosity should never be mistaken for a license to mistreat, nor should kindness ever be viewed as a vulnerability to be exploited by the ungrateful. It takes immense courage to realise that walking away from a toxic dynamic is not an act of malice, but a necessary reclamation of one's own soul. Every single individual deserves a sanctuary of peace, where their basic humanity is met with profound reverence rather than cruel contempt. We must learn to audit the relationships in our lives regularly, ensuring that we are investing our love where it is genuinely cherished and reciprocated. Silence in the face of injustice within our own homes is often just as destructive as the loudest insult thrown by an aggressor. Standing up for yourself might temporarily disrupt the comfort of others, but it is the only way to restore the sacred alignment of your own self-respect. Life has a beautiful way of reminding us that it is never too late to reinvent ourselves, to paint our walls yellow, and to completely rewrite our own narrative. True strength lies in the calloused hands that know how to build, but also possess the wisdom to tear down what no longer serves a healthy purpose. We owe it to ourselves to stop apologising for taking up space in a world that so desperately needs our unique light, wisdom and experience. Let this narrative serve as a profound mirror for how we treat the matriarchs and patriarchs who poured their lifeblood into our upbringings. When we actively uplift the elders of our society, we weave a much stronger, more compassionate fabric for the generations yet to come. Growth often requires us to allow those we love to experience the natural consequences of their actions so they can finally find their own footing. Ultimately, a life well lived is one where we firmly reclaim the remote control of our own happiness, choosing to smell like triumph rather than the misery imposed by others. Disclaimer. This commentary and the accompanying narrative analysis are presented solely for educational, motivational, and illustrative purposes. The perspectives shared aim to foster humanistic values, personal development, and healthy interpersonal boundaries. This content does not constitute professional legal advice, financial counsel, or psychological therapy, and listeners are encouraged to seek qualified professionals for their specific life situations.